Welcome back to Herbal Explorations. Hi, I'm Wilson Lau from New Herbs, and today on Herbal Explorations, I have the pleasure of speaking with my friend Erin Smith. We will discuss the impact and importance of ethical sourcing, how the industry is transforming, and what is driving this change. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Welcome to Herbal Explorations. Today I have the pleasure of welcoming my friend Erin Smith, who has worked with botanicals for over 30 years, ranging from her work with indigenous communities as an ethnobotanist to being the chair of the American Herbal Products Association Sustainability Committee. Now you have access to all her years of wisdom as a consultant. Before we dive into our discussion, could you share a bit about your journey in the world of sustainability?
Sure. So nice to be here with you today, Wilson. I love our conversation, so I'm sure this is going to be great. My journey with sustainability around botanicals in general is, first and foremost, I'm an herbalist and just have a love of the plants and what they can do, and so have always. I think when you study herbalism, it's hard to not uh, dive into the world of sustainability and how to take care of them and use them in the right way. It's kind of part of that education already. And then as an ethnobotanist as well, I worked with communities around the world on the ground with how they were using, natural resources and including plants and medicinal plants and herbs, and just had just such a great experience there of just seeing, what the impact was of when it's not done correctly and when it can be done really correctly. That's not only great for the plants, but good for the people that work with them as well. And then from doing that, I found my way into the natural product industry, and I just have a real passion for being able to combine all of that here in this industry and to be able to help businesses source things in a really sustainable way and to be considering all of that, kind of the whole picture of what's
Yeah,
involved.
Yeah, as fellow members of the Sustainable Herb Project, we get to explore a topic that's both crucial and close to our hearts here at New Herbs, yeah, the ethical sourcing of herbs. I think this is a subject that touches on environmental, social, and economic layers of the herbal industry. And I really want to discuss this with you because of your experience and insights, ranging from being your unique experience being an ethnobotanist, herbalist, and also having worked on the business side of the herbal industry versus just using the herbs itself just as a herbalist. Not just as a herbalist, I should say.
Yeah.
My dad might have some different thoughts on that comment, so let me correct it before I get a stern talking to at home. Uh, let's start off by talking about the origins and what ethical harvesting is. First of all, what do you consider ethical harvesting?
To me, ethical harvesting is really harvesting in a way that you're protecting and even promoting kind of healthy plant populations, but also biodiversity, like the whole ecosystem and the knowledge and livelihoods of harvesters, and so for me, that's really what ethical harvesting is. It's really about doing it in a way that it's not just, for me, there's a little additional, it's not just about protecting it, but how can you actually be a part of improving the plant populations or the biodiversity or livelihoods. So that
Yeah,
would be my short, quick definition.
yeah, I think you and I can go on for days about this and probably even longer, but let's let's keep it short for now. Let's keep it at a high level. I think when we talk about ethical harvesting, to your point, the way you harvest is very important. I think, you can take a backhoe and go dig licorice. It may not be the best way to do it. It is a way to do it versus making sure that you leave enough root systems in there to ensure that it will regrow and continue doing what it does well, and not only providing an efficacious source of herbal constituents and properties, but also, preventing against erosion. So I think there's a lot to be said about protecting that ecosystem biodiversity, and how that impacts the human side of things and the culture is intertwined with these plants.
Yeah.
And based on that, as an ethnobotanist, how do you think ethical harvesting helps keep their rich heritage alive or their traditions alive? Even it's sort of coming to human against nature, I guess.
Well, yeah, I mean, in ethnobotany circles, a lot of times they will say, knowledge comes from use. If you stop using the plants and the environment and all of that, the knowledge quickly will disappear. So, we really encouraging and supporting and using medicinal plants that are ethically harvested are also in that way supporting that cultural use and that knowledge, and also supporting that it is still valid. I think one of our biggest issues is the younger generation being more and more in these communities excited about technology and all of that and new things, and not necessarily wanting to do the traditional stuff, but that's really important that we keep that knowledge. So how do we support that it is a very valued skill, and knowledge that they contain, just living and breathing that and knowing those ecosystems better than anyone else, and that plant in that location where they are better than anyone else, and that's valued. But yeah, I think just ethical harvesting in itself, and just doing that, it seems counterintuitive on some level. People think, oh, if you're harvesting, you're extracting, therefore it must be hurting in some way, the biodiversity, or don't make that cultural connection and the knowledge connection that you actually need to be doing that to support that knowledge. And actually, there's a lot of research that shows that when it's done in that ethical way, it can actually support biodiversity and have a positive impact rather than a negative.
I love your comment really about keeping that traditional knowledge alive. It's just like anything else in our lives. Use it or lose it, right? You might be a
Yep.
very skilled, you know, tennis player, but if you don't play for 10, 20 years, you're going to lose a lot of that skill. So it's that muscle memory and keeping those traditions alive, bringing them out into the fields, whether it's grown or wildcrafted, and really sharing that traditional knowledge, how to do it the right way to support that environment. I think it's just one of those things that ecological stewardship is so important for what we do at New Herbs. I don't know if I shared this with you. We're working on a organic fair wild northern Schisandra project in northern China. Hopefully, it'll be online by the end of this year. But it's really, to your point, um, it's located in this big forestry, and
Mhm.
they can't do anything else there. But because we're using Sazandra and we're doing it in a way that will protect it, they're allowing us to go into the forestry, take out those sources, and sort of thinning it out, and maybe helping some of that, uh, thinning out some of the canopy so some of the sun can get through and do some
Mhm.
things that may not happen otherwise. But I think,
Yep.
moving from this is so important, I think, and there's so many different ways we can do that. And let's move on from harvesting to sourcing. Let's change the word ethical harvesting to ethical sourcing. Um, I want to give you my definition of what I think ethical sourcing is first, and I'll let you take the second stab at it this time. I think for me, ethical sourcing is a three-legged stool: it's humans, plants, and native environment. It really involves principle like fair trade and equitable compensation. And if you don't protect the human element, there's not going to be anyone to do the work and really stay there to sort of keep the traditions alive and really ensure that we have access of it. And I think, what we do at New Herbs is so important to what we do at New Herbs. And it's really under our, what I call ITAL system, Love Herbs framework. And
Mhm.
it's really trying to focus on protecting the herbs in place. And how about you?
No, I totally agree with you. I mean, I think it's the same. For me, it's also about, um, looking at it from with a partnership mentality in mind rather than a purely extractive mind or just exchange of like, I'm going to buy that from you and that's it. And so whether, to me, that's a key part of the ethical, along with everything that you state too, is like, how do you go into it, whether it's working with you as the great partner, or if it's, working with a farmer in their area, depending on where they are and the size of the company. But how do you go into that more, looking at it from a partnership angle, so that you can look at that holistic piece of it, in all of those angles versus just an exchange of, extractive exchange and commerce purely, I'm going to purchase this from you. Okay, thanks, bye,
Yeah.
type of thing. So I think it really needing to shift that mindset, to me, is the beginning really of ethical sourcing, is how do I become a good partner with whoever that is that you're choosing to do, but
Yeah.
coming at it from the
And well, Erin, you and I might sound really aligned. I think it's because we've been working together and talking to each other for so many years about this. Weren't we just on a panel? If I remember correctly, you were on the panel as well at Expo West, talking about
Mhm.
the importance of relationships and partnerships in sourcing. And it really can't be, I'm here today, gone tomorrow. We're unreliable. We really have to support each other in this ecosystem. All the
Mhm.
parties do. Well, to get predictability, help people come over, smooth over the the issues that really may come up, whether it's weather or whatever it may be. But I think without these partnerships, you really can't continuously keep the project alive, right? And I think
Right.
it's so important, right? Because weather is so uncertain and there's so many other factors now out there.
Yeah.
So we got to really figure out how to contribute to the economic and social well-being of the communities that we work with, whether it's upstream or downstream.
Yeah.
How do you think ethical sourcing shapes the economic and social well-being of the communities that haven't said that? What do you think that how does that impact the communities that where there is this partnership versus a transactional model?
I think, I mean, it helps in that it's something that becomes more consistent and reliable, versus if it's just transactional, they might be grateful for that one transaction, but maybe they don't know if they can count necessarily, and maybe they can, even if you have a contract. Um, I think the ethical piece of it, just naturally, you're more involved, in all of it in discussion, so it becomes a more reliable partnership and income, and they can ask, hopefully in an ideal world, they're communicating where their challenges are to you, and then you guys can have the conversation back, or you can, talk about new crops to grow that can help them. I think one of the biggest things for a lot of people with sourcing botanicals or communities dependent on them is there's a seasonal nature. So they might get most of their income from it in a traditional model in one particular time in the year, and then the rest of the year they're still struggling and figuring that out. So how in ethical sourcing, I feel like, and with partnerships and things, you're able to address those issues and figure out how to support them more long term. I also feel like with consistent partnerships and knowing that they have that, coming in an ethical sourcing way, they're also able to, not have to be, it leads to more sustainable practices in a way, because if they're not running around thinking, I just need to get as much as I can, say it's a wild harvested herb, I just need to harvest as much of this as I can in the amount of time that I can, so I can make the most money possible while this is here as an opportunity. They're not, all of us are going to be like that if we're in survival mode, where they're going to be more focused on the
Mhm.
amounts and not so much on the quality of what they're harvesting, or the amount, or the practices they're using that are going to ensure, future harvests next year to be even more thriving for them. So I think doing that, ethical part of the sourcing, and thinking of all holistic picture of it, just helps ensure that they have a consistency and a reliability that allows them to focus even more on doing all these other things that they care, they care about just as much. They want to have this as a career and a long-term source of income just as much as anyone on our side would want, and a company would want reliable, high quality product for many years.
Yeah. I love what you said about high quality products, right? It's one of
Mhm.
those things. If we invest in them and the project and the area, they also will invest their energy and effort to best support what we do.
Yeah.
With, not only from a sustainability standpoint, but to your point, high quality
Hmm.
herbs. And high quality herbs lead to high quality products, right?
Yeah.
It's like you can't make a dish you can't make the ingredients any better, right? But you can ruin
Mhm.
them. But you can't, if you have poor quality ingredients, you can't make a high quality product, right? You need high quality ingredients to make
Right.
high quality products. Can you explain how these practices help maintain or even enhance the quality of the herbal
Mhm.
products or herbal ingredients?
Sure. I mean, there's lots of different ways to do. There's lots of different aspects in that it does it. I mean, in one sense, we can just start the bigger picture too. Our plants and the quality and the constituents that make them so effective and all of that are determined by the environment that they grow in. So the healthier that environment that they grow in, the healthier that the populations are cared for and harvested in the right way, they're going to be healthier plants that are going to have more efficacious constituents in there and have that profile that you're wanting. So there's that aspect of it as well. But like I was saying, it's also that attention to detail and being able to take the time and to partner with you and everyone else. What is the specifications that they're wanting? And being able to actually grow and harvest to meet that, to be able to pay attention to those types of things, to have communication about, oh, we're having this issue, whether it be mold or whatever it is, and in problem solving together, this is what we think is causing it. How could we actually address that? And have it allows those conversations and that kind of partnered problem solving too, so that you do get that very high quality product that comes out, which we all want. I mean, every company wants that. And even me as a consumer of the herbs, you want the highest, most efficacious. So I think there's so many different ways that it can improve the quality to do this, from that more macro, just how the healthier ecosystem provides a healthier plant
Yeah.
to how they're actually harvesting it and processing it and drying it and the partnership in that and meeting specifications.
I think what a lot of people don't understand is that if you're buying from traders or a agglomerator, you can't control these factors that you just talked
Mm-mm.
about. And one of the things that we discovered is, people think sustainability is this, you got to do all these crazy things and it takes so much, you know, cost, right? I'm
Right.
not going to say this doesn't take effort because it takes a lot of effort, human effort, and but it's one of those things that, look, if I am sourcing and helping my client find a certain herb and they have a certain marker that they have to hit in their extract or product, well, if I'm working directly with the cultivators or the people that are growing it or the wildcrafters, now I can sort of go in there and pull samples at different stages of
Yep.
growth and sort of see where that optimal harvest time and condition may be to sort of impact the highest what my client
Yeah.
defines as quality according to their specification sheet. So by doing that, now we have reduced the amount of herbs needed to make vis-a-vis the same product. So I think there's so many different ways that you can impact it, and it's how you dry it,
Hmm.
how you process it, how do you make sure their safety is met. So this
Yeah.
transparency is so crucial, right? Like to really produce in an effective and efficient way the best quality product that we can make as an industry.
Mm-hmm. And often I would add to, just like doing it this way as well, you also end up getting fresher material. I think a lot of people don't realize sometimes if you're going through so many different people and how long it's sitting in different places, and that also plays it. So all of it, I mean, there's so many little things that add to that making it higher quality.
Yeah. And I think the thing is this, and I think this is a whole different conversation. But we sometimes, we as an industry are stuck on freshness. I think it really matters for things that are high in volatile oils. But
Mm-hmm.
if it's well protected in
Mm-hmm.
whole root, you know, some of these roots actually get better with age, like wine. But we'll get into that conversation a different day.
Yeah, let's do it. I love it.
Yeah. How do we as an industry communicate the traceability of our products and the authenticity of our practices as consumers? Like, how do we share with them all this care and what we're doing to make a difference in a way that the consumers can get behind it?
Yeah, and this is like the big question, isn't it? I think every company really challenges with this. What is that magic bullet formula that makes every customer kind of go, oh, yeah, and get really excited about it? I mean, obviously, the power of storytelling, I think, is huge. And any way that that works for your company and your customers to just keep trying it and keep telling the stories. I think there's definitely other ways that companies, try and do it too with the QR codes on the bottles and having it linked to cool things. There's lots of technological ways to do it. But I'm also a really big proponent in the storytelling too. I think of just really telling the whole story. So that means also telling the challenges,
Mm-hmm.
that transparency piece, because that builds that trust as well. To be able to say like, hey, we're really trying to figure this out and this didn't work and this is what we're thinking we're going to try to see if it will work, or yay, this is our big success. But I think companies sometimes really shy away from that level of transparency. But I think the more, um, whoever, whether it's on this end, whatever you are in the whole process, whether you're the brand that's reaching the consumers or whatever, the more you're able to share that real honest story, it just builds trust and gets them excited in the journey too, to be a part of that journey.
I love that comment because we've been working on this organic fair wild project for 4 years now, and without COVID, it wouldn't take this long. But
Yeah.
uh, it it reminds me to tell to sort of share those trials and tribulations because part of it is that's how you sort of you know you're just getting one side of the story versus the whole story. And I think sometimes, hey, being part of it is like, yes, I'm pulling for you. I'm pulling for you. Yeah, we finally got this across the line, right? So that's part of the story versus like, oh, we just finished, well, great.
Hey.
We don't know, understand how hard you trained and all these things, right?
Yeah. Gotta know how long some of these things takes. And also I think it helps consumers understand like why it's not that easy. So some companies might get there, but others aren't, and they might not understand the what is behind it. But knowing the difficulty, that what might seem like a simple thing, all the years that could go behind that. Um, and in the end, I do think building that trust also helps the consumers when they're making that choice off a shelf or from different suppliers of their herbs, and there's a price difference, they know what's encompassed in that difference, that they're
Hmm.
willing to pay that.
Yeah.
So,
I have a question that, from your experience, right? What is something, whether it's a practice or some event that really made a huge difference in maintaining the ecological balance or sustainability of a environment or a particular herb? Anything that comes to your mind?
um, I mean, it's so specific to each plant. I think just even knowing that maybe is part of it, is that there isn't a one thing fits all, because all our plants are so beautifully unique, like we all of
Hmm.
us are, and it depends on the environment they're growing in, and all of that. And so I think just realizing that and taking the time to get to know that and to really make sure that what you're, just because, what's going to work for you in your Shazandra project, there's elements of that might be able to be replicated in other things, but there might be parts of it that are unique to Shazandra. So taking that time to understand what are the nuances. So that's why it's hard to think of just one thing, but I guess in a way that's part of it, is just realizing how unique they all are.
Yeah.
Um,
I love
and
how you're
that's
celebrating the differences in our biodiversity and ecosystem, and how all the plants are so individualistic. I had some more time to think about this question, so I have an answer that is reflective of that. I'll sort of give you, to your point, it's so reflective on the category. I think the one thing I do know, it's easier to do it in a ecological way and sustainable way with berries that are and fruits that reproduce on an annual basis versus something, a root where you take it and it could be really never coming back, right?
true.
So there's
Mm.
there's that difference in the type of, what part of the plant are we talking about.
Yeah.
But I'll give you an instance. I think that I it's been sort of sitting with me the last couple of years, is, as to your point earlier in this conversation, is really, as the population gets older, a lot of young people aren't coming back into this system, right? Thus, the labor pool is shrinking and the cost of labor is increasing,
Mhm.
because they have options to go other places and to find other work. One of the things that I am struggling with is really like, look, for there are things that grow wild in the wild, such as Sazandra or blueberries. We'll go with blueberries, right? What is the ecological impact of using this resource that's wildly grown in a way that's sustainable versus growing it because it's cheaper to grow than wild harvest? And we're sort of getting to that point in China where it's like, where people can go to the city and work in a factory or whatever it may be versus staying in the rural areas and doing this traditional type of work.
Yeah.
So literally, I think, I have a pretty good idea that my wild collected Sazandra is going to cost more than my cultivated organic Sazandra, because labor costs are up and it just takes a little
Right.
bit more labor to do that kind of work. But the ecological impact of using something that would happen regardless of whether you go harvest it or not, right? The berries are gonna grow, they're gonna fall off and whatnot, versus growing it will take all these additional inputs, right? So I think, that to me is like one of the things, like, how do we use what we have and not try to replicate it, although it's cheaper to just
Right.
produce it, whether in the laboratory, factory, or growing it, right?
Mhm.
S- all these things that we have to think about. But how do you think these sustainable practice impact the quality and efficacy of the final herbal product? Do you think there's a direct relationship between sustainability and therapeutic value of the herbs?
I do. I mean, just based on what we were talking about earlier, just, with that, all the factors that feed into having a higher quality herb and being able to have those relationships so that you can have that conversation with communities that do it. But to me, it's also that big piece of like, um, uh, the plants respond to the environment that they grow in, right? And so if you have a more sustainable, healthy, either it's wild area or even a farm that's thriving with biodiversity and the soil's really healthy and it's being harvested in a way that's, very mindful of that and all of that, that's going to have an impact in that final product. And I wish there was more like concrete research on there. We're starting to get that way with looking at nutrients and regenerative agriculture and things, but I think it can be the same. Like we could actually look at what that, you know, how that looks at. We have research on wild versus cultivated and how that's different, but I think we can also actually start to do research on however we want to define what that sustainability piece is, and how that's defined, and then try and look at the impact on the marker compounds. I mean, we can go that way, but I think it absolutely creates thriving. And to our point earlier, the social piece of it and the people that we need to make sure they're thriving and healthy populations and happy and want to keep doing this work. So,
Yeah. I think, what you just said is so true, right? Especially with these new reporting requirements coming out of the EU and coming down the pike in the US. I think, Aaron, like you're going to be one of the business people because this research needs to get done. And as soon
mhm,
as this research feeds into reporting that's coming down the pike in the US and already is happening in the European Union, you really will see that companies will invest to do the work because once
mhm,
you have to report it, and these reports are required by financial institutions and the government, now they are audible to make sure that you're not doing financial misfeasance or other things.
right.
And it's just so crazy that what's going to drive us to do the research as a world is because
Mhm.
we have to report to the people that hold the purse strings.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. It is. It's so I'm as a plant lover, I love learning more and more about the plants. So anytime we can do more research, whatever allows that to happen, I'm super excited about that. And I do it. But yeah, it is. It's kind of crazy. But I think we have so much to learn and so much that's already there that we just aren't looking under the hood essentially to see what's going on. And I'm really excited in the future to see what's going to come out from
Yeah.
all of that. And I do think we will have the data to back up the impact of these sustainable practices. So even more.
Yeah, I think so too. Do you know of any examples of a standard or some kind of research that's been done that has significantly changed some of these practices, or something that you think should be done that that would have a huge impact in the future?
I mean, I think there are different standards and certifications out there that definitely have had an impact. The Fair Wild and Fair for Life and organic. I mean, if you think about what it was before organic and where organic is now and the impact that that's had, that definitely all makes a difference. But there's a lot of challenges that come with that too. So I think we have to really look before we add new ones, which we can always do. I think we have to really understand and look at what we've learned already from those that have been around for a while, and what are their wins and what are the challenges that are making that hard, where they're not growing even faster. The percentage of organic or fair trade and all of that, and how do we tackle those? Because that's really, it has to be something that is doable for companies, but doable for the farmers and the communities too, to meet those standards. So what are those challenges, and how can we help tackle them and make it exciting and doable for everything, so it's for everyone in the supply chain, so that it expands.
Yeah, I think, to your point, like it has to be realistic and it has to be
Mhm.
implementable. I
Yep.
think a lot of these standards still haven't really seen the full benefit of it yet because they haven't been fully, they follow the standards, but the standards are written in a way that is more aspirational than how the each box is checked, right? If we
Mhm.
were really reaching for the true meaning of what they are saying,
Right.
there's a lot more work to be done and could be done. And I really love how you really are tying the different elements of the supply chain, and it's really back to our three-legged stool, right? So
Mhm.
every layer is a three-legged stool that sort of builds into a pyramid to finally be able to deliver a great product and
Mhm.
so that the consumer can enjoy, right? You have to have a good wide base, otherwise they'll topple.
Mhm.
How are some of these evolving practices influencing consumer expectations and behavior? Have you noticed that this is really changing how consumers are buying products? What's your insight in how does this end up at the consumer level?
I do think it's changing. I mean, I think there's a higher demand now than there ever has been for responsible, ethical, sustainable, whatever words or all of the words, products. And they want to know that. They want to know that what they're buying, they want to support companies that align with their values. So they kind of pay attention a lot more. There are consumers out there that pay attention a lot more to what is that company's values and how are they communicating that. But I do still think there's that reality of cost. Like it really it costs a lot more to right now to make products, with this, and therefore that ends up with what the price is on the shelf as well. And then it becomes only certain people that are able to spend that kind of money on it. And so we have to acknowledge that too. And how do we address that? Is it that the broader these practices become norm, the costs are just, is it going to go down and it's going to be the norm? And so it's more reasonable for everything. Is it more that there's supplemental help out there that are helping? But I don't know. There's a lot of things that I think we have to think about and address and acknowledge, and that in many ways it's a privilege for a lot of people to be able to pay that extra, even if they really believe it and want it. If they can't make that choice, that's hard. But I do feel hope in that. I feel like companies are responding to that demand too, that the consumers are wanting it, especially the younger generation, and expecting it. And I just hope we can meet it with really not companies responding with a lot of greenwashing, but having a lot of oomph behind what they're doing and a lot of thought. I mean, I think sometimes what's hard and counterintuitive is that in some ways I think of it as the same way we think about the slow food movement and things like
Yeah.
that, where you have to take the time. It's like you kind of have to do that in your sourcing, and then what it ends up with the product. Like there's just a slowness to it, a holisticness to it, which is a little counterintuitive to the capitalist norm of how things have happened. But I feel hope that it's changing and shifting, and that consumers are really starting to ask the questions and look for it.
Yeah, I think one of the things is that we have urgency and we need to get this done now because
Yeah.
we don't want to reach the tipping point of 2 degrees Celsius, of increase of 2 degrees Celsius. But it's like we can't tackle everything at once. So it's like, what can you do to sort of move things along and help make a dent, right? There's no company in even the world, if we all did something differently tomorrow as a collective, could we that be enough? So we got to figure out what we can do individually, as companies, as industries, as countries, as a world, to sort of make these positive changes, right? I think to your point, it's just like we got to start doing, but we can't rush and do the wrong thing either, right? So we got to do things that we know work
Oh,
and
I
move
was
on.
going to say, I think it also, the answer to that question, like, what is it? What is the piece that we can do? And all that is probably different. Like, from a company's perspective, it's going to be different for every company. Because, like, if you're a new company starting and you're like, okay, you can start from scratch and incorporate all of this. I'm going to only, source ethically and build my supply chain with all of this in mind. It's a very different thing, the answer to that and how to do that, than a company that's been around for a long time and wants to tweak it and make it better and switch it and has long-term relationships already in place. So I think, yeah, it's going to be company specific, but I think every single company has their answers of what the thing they can do now that would make a difference.
Yeah, I think so too. And what do you see as the future of ethical sourcing in the herbal industry?
I mean, I think it's going to be, it's going to have to be the way everything's done. It's going to have to be the norm, because we're an industry that's dependent on natural resources in an age of climate change. And so if we don't do ethical, sustainable sourcing, we will put ourselves out of business. Like, we will not be able to have the resources and these herbs that we depend on so much to make our products. Like that's just the reality of it. So I think it's going to have to continue to grow and be the norm. I think for me, the exciting piece of it and where I feel the real change and the impact can come is collaboration. Like I'm really excited to see more and more industry collaboration to tackle the issues, pre-competitive collaboration, people that are competing on the shelf, but coming together at the sourcing side to see how can we, change this and do this right and tackle some of these issues together. And I think that's where we're going to make the biggest difference.
Yeah, I think I totally concur with you that that's where it's collaboration, working together, right? We're still competitors, but there's so many tools that we are lacking today that we can build as, you know, as even beyond the industry, but within the industry, like how do we measure this or how do we do this? What is that KPI? How do we gather the data, right? These things are pre-competitive, right? It's sort of like we all need to be speaking the same language and measuring in a way that is standardized. Otherwise, Erin's going to be like, you know, look at that white hair. I'm gonna be like, what white hair? like,
Exactly.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, if I grow out my hair, there's a lot of white hair, but it's just like I remember you last time right? It's like, so we got to look at it in the same way, right? Are you looking at it?
Yeah.
How are we measuring? This whatever we're measuring, right? And how we're doing it. So I think that's so great. I think there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of work to be done, and there's so many ways that it can get done. I think there's no one magic solution. So, Erin, thanks for the great chat. I really thank you for joining me today. And can you tell Erin, thank you for joining me on Herbal Explorations today. How can listeners find you on LinkedIn, or how can they find you so you can help them with their sustainability or supply chain issues?
Thank you so much, Wilson. It's been such a pleasure. Yeah, people can find me at my website, which is esbotanical, not an S, esbotanical.com. And my email is erin@esbotanical.com. And then you can find me on LinkedIn as well. I'm sure there's multiple Erin Smiths. So if you put -plant Deva at the end, DEVA, it'll come up. I'll pop up because I think there's a lot of us out there on the LinkedIn world with Smith. That's it, but I so enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Wilson.
And thank you so much. And once again, ES Botanical without the S, unlike New Herbs, which does have a S. So you'll as a new business owner, you'll get all the variations of your business's name in the future. Thanks for listening to another episode of Herbal Explorations. To learn more about the business of herbs and botanicals, visit newherbs.com. To keep listening to great episodes, be sure to subscribe to this podcast and make sure you give us a rating too. Until next time.